verbs are divided in three groups, depending on the endings of the verbs. We have three groups. Verbs ending in are, like parlare, mangiare, and so on. Verbs ending in ere, like leggere, credere, and so on. And verb ending in ire, like dormire, finire, etc. The form inare, inere, inire, the entire form, so like parlare, leggere, dormire, they are called infinitive form. So actually they are the equivalent of the English to something. In the specific case, to talk, to eat. Okay? We will talk later about forms inere and inire. Let's concentrate today on forms inare. So all the verbs ending in are part of the first group and a part of the first conjugation. Just keep in mind that the form parlare, mangiare, and all the other forms in are infinitive forms. So they're equivalent of to talk, to eat, etc. So when you use them with a pronoun, with a person, you have to conjugate them. Means like you have to take that form and transform. You do the same in English. You don't say I to talk, but you say I talk, and you know, and so on. So what you do even in English, even if it's not so easy, you know, in English to understand, because you just remove talk, and when you speak about he and she, you add an S. In Italian, we have different forms. You know, we have 6 different forms. So that is actually a clear conjugation of the verb. But the same thing is actually happening in English, because you don't say I to talk, you to talk, but you transform the infinitive form to talk in a present tense forms. And this is what we are going to do here with the Italian verb. So let's take parlare as a model to learn the verbs, the present tense of the verb in are. So I talk becomes io parlo. Now, what I did, I removed the are. Can you see here? I removed the are. That is, you know, like the ending of the infinitive form, and I added an o. So I remove are. Every time that I wanna conjugate the verb, I take the infinitive form. In our case, verbs ending in are, for those verbs, the infinitive form is are. So if I have mangiare, I remove are in mangiare, so what it will be left will be mangi, okay? So every time I remove the are and I take the root, the part that is left, and what I do, I add, no, for the first person, io, I add an o. So I talk becomes io parlo. Now, you talk. Let me remove the bold. Okay, you talk, you do exactly the same thing. So you know, is tu, and then you have the root, because how do you obtain the root? Removing are. So in the verb parlare, what is left is parle. Now with tu, you have to remember the form is not o, but it will be I, the English I. So it will be tu parli. Okay, let me put a bold. Let's go ahead and let's see what is going to happen with he and she. He, and now we go with she. talks. You see, in English, even in English, you're conjugating a verb because in this case, what you do, you had an S. In Italian, it's a little bit more complex because we have 6 forms, not just 2 as you have in English. We have 6 different forms for the verb. So he and she, you know that he and she is lui, lei, and we take the root and we memorize the form, and the ending in this case is a. So it will be lui parla. Okay, and we can go ahead now with the formal. Remember the formal U in English, the U formal. You know, in Italian is the equivalent of lui and lei form. You already studied this with a verb essere and avere. So it will be, first of all, lei, and we prefer to write lei, you formal, with a capital letter, and since has the same exactly form of he and she, it will be lui, lei, sorry, the formal, lei parla. Now, let's see we. So, we talk. Okay, so we is noi. You know that you have to take first the root, and is still the same, parla, and you add the form for noi, and it's iamo. So the result will be noi parliamo. Now I'm dividing the root, no, and the ending just to make it clear, but you write parlo, parli, parla as one word. Don't leave a space between the root and the ending. Okay, let's go ahead. You all, to say you plural in English, so you know that in Italian you all is voi. I'm sorry, let me write first. You all talk. So it's voi, root, parla, and you must remember the ending for voi, and it's ate. So the result will be voi parlate. Okay, now we have just another form, that is they talk. So the equivalent of they in Italian is loro. Same thing, the root, and now the form, the ending for loro. And it's ano, so the result at the end will be loro parlano. Point, if I gave you another regular verb in are, you will be able to conjugate it because you have all the forms. So for example, I gave you a verb like cantare. Cantare is the equivalent of to sing. And I'm asking you, I want you to say they sing in Italian. Okay, they sing. You have cantare. Remember, when I gave you cantare, I gave you the infinitive form. So I gave you the equivalent of to sing. What you have to do, the first thing that you have to do when you have to conjugate the verb, when you have to use with the person, what you have to do, you have to drop are. So that is the first thing. So the result is what? Can't. So I ask you to give me the equivalent of they sing. So now you have can't. You know that they in Italian is loro. So you have to check for what form? For the form that works with loro. You go here, you see, you have parlano. In this case, you don't take parlano, but you take just the ending that you need, and you add that ending to the root of the verb that I gave you, in this case can't, and the result will be can't and plus ano, so the result will be cantano. So let's say now I'm asking you, no, I wanna know how to say in Italian you sing. You do the same thing. US2, you know that you have to drop are, so cantare, drop the are, and you have can't. Then can't, and then you check, no, for the ending that works with to, and the result will be canti, since the ending for to is e, English I, and so on. Verbs ending in care and verbs ending in gare are still verbs in are, are still part of the first group and the first conjugation. So they still have the same endings that we talked about just a few minutes ago. But we have to be careful, because in the case of verb in care and gare, I want to just give you two examples here. Let's take a verb like giocare. You see, giocare is a verb that ends in are, but has a C in front of the are. So we call that verb ending in care. We make a little distinction between are and care, because you have remembered one very small rule. And the same thing happened with a verb like pagare. You see, it's still a verb in are, but we call pagare a verb in gare because there's a G in front of are. So in the same, so it's the same thing of care. We have just a small little rule here that we have to remember. So verb like those, like giocare, to play a game or sport, or pagare, that means to pay, no, they work as a verb of the first conjugation. So when we need to conjugate them, when we need to use them with a person, so with I, you, they, etc., we have to do the same exactly thing. And remember the what we do. We drop the are, so in the case of giocare, I will have gioc, and in the case of pagare, I will have pag. So you see, you do exactly the same thing, but you must remember then when you have to conjugate those verbs ending in care and gare with to and with noi. Okay, let me write capitals so you will remember better. To and noi, you must add an H in between the root and the ending. Let me show you. Let's take giocare. So I play, you just follow the rule, and it's simple. Now you have giocare, drop are, add o, because o is the ending. So you will have like io gioco. Okay. Easy. Now, if you just follow the rule when you go to, you will do to gioc, remember, and then remember the ending. We have seen this with parlare, is the Italian E and the English I, so it will be gio. And if you do this, you will read in Italian to gioci. But Italians like to keep the hard sounds that you have in gioco. So they like to keep k. So the only way to keep k is to put an H in between the C and the I. So with verbs like giocare and the in care, you must remember that when you form, like the two form, you must add an H in between the root and the ending. So between C and in this case, and I. Okay, if we go ahead, no problem, it would be the same. Lui, lei, gioca. What you had? Remember? Gioca. Lei forma, gioca. Noi, okay, again. If you just follow the rule you have studied before, it will be noi, gioc, and what you have to add here, it will be iamo. So if you read this in Italian, it will be noi giociamo, ch instead of k. But Italians like to keep the R sound of the C, so in the case of noi, as we saw with tu, we add an H. So the result will be noi giochiamo. I'm using a capital letter here to stress, this event. Doesn't mean that you have to write with an H with a capital letter, right? Just write like a normal letter. So let's go ahead. The rest is normal. So voi, gioc, and what you have, remember, ate, and loro, gioc. You check for the ending, e, es, ano, so loro giocano. Okay, same thing happened with verbs ending with gare. So let's take a verb pagare, to pay. Io pag plus the ending o, no problem. 2, now you know the rule. If I will do like this, just simply add an I, it would be tu pagi, but I want the sound g, and the only way to keep g in front of an I in Italian is to add an H. You already learned this when we talk about the noun. Like fungo. If you want to make the plural of fungo, yes, you drop the O, you add the I, but if you want to sound good, you have to add an H. That's why, let's say fungo, the plural, it will be fungi with an H, okay? So you already know this. Or like even k, amica, amiche with an H. Remember, amici without an H was an exception. Okay, so it's the same kind of event. So I can write without an H here because the result will be G, not G. Since I say io pago, I want to keep G. And so the only way to do that is to add an H. So as I did with gioco, with verb incare, I do the same thing with verb ingare. So you pay, it will be tu paghi. Now, lui, lei, this is normal, paga, noi. Again, we have the same problem. If I will just follow the rule, it will be paghiamo, but I want to say paghiamo. So, again, I add an H, and then voi pagate, and loro pagano. This is normal. So remember that verbs ending in care and gare, they add an H in between the C and G and the I and iamo. So remember that they add an H in between the root and the ending with tu and with noi. Now, the last case, the last little exception. Let's take another verb, still in iare, but actually in iare. Okay, verb like mangiare, you see, it ends in are, but I see that there is an I before the ending are. Okay, I have to remember this kind of verbs. Next, mangiare, I can give you another one. Studiare, to study. Mangiare means to eat. Studiare means to study. So now, if I want to say I eat, I study, etc., etc., what I do? Exactly the same thing. I drop, let's take mangiare as a model. I drop are, so what is the result? Io mangi. If I drop are, what is left? It's mangi. This is the root. So this is the root. And what I have to do here now? Add the correct ending. And at this point, you know that is O. So the result will be io mangio. Now let's go to I take the root. Again, the root is mangi because the root is what is left after I drop are. So tu mangi. Now, what is going to happen here? I check the endings, and what is the ending for tu? Is I. Now, here you would have tu mangi. So you will have tu I, and they're not necessary. So that's why with tu, in the case of verbi iare, we don't add the second I. So it will be just mangi. It looks like you just like keep the root in this case. Remember, with tu don't add the second I. And then I go ahead, lui, lei, and it's perfectly normal here. Mangi is the root, and I have to add the ending for lui e lei. So it's same thing for lei formal. Now, noi, root, and what is the ending for noi? It will be iamo. If you put them together, the result will be mangiamo with two I. Same thing that we did with two, we remove one. Okay? And then voi mangiate. This is regular. You just keep the root and you add ate. Same thing for loro. Loro mangi, this is the root, and then I add ano. Okay, loro mangiano. So even in this case, like for care and gare, you must remember the forms tu and noi. So tu and noi. And what you have to remember in the case of tu and noi with verbs in iare like mangiare, studiare, etc., that you don't need to add a second I. So instead of mangi, it will be mangi. Instead of mangiamo, it will be simply mangiamo. Okay? Yes, that's it. I want to just tell you that a verb like this, sciare, to ski, it looks like mangiare and it's exactly like mangiare. But in this case, we need to keep both I. Remember this as an exception. So use the model of mangiare for all the verbs in iare. So remember to drop an I. But with a verb, sciare, to ski, just follow the main rule. So io scio. Tu sci. Otherwise, it will sound tu sci and doesn't sound correct. So io scio, tu sci, lui e lei scia. Noi sciamo. So noi sciamo with two I. Actually, when you pronounce it, sounds like a one long. Noi sciamo. We don't actually say noi sciamo. We say noi sciamo. But when you write with two I. Voi sciate, loro sciano. Okay, so remember, like sciare is an exception. So with sciare, just follow parlare. But with all the other verbs in iare, follow mangiare model. Okay.